Hello guys and gals, good day to you. We're going to review The Monk by Matthew G. Lewis. Did I enjoy it? I did. At the very ending, I found a passage online that I particularly liked or peculiarly liked, and I want to go over my teleprompter review. I wrote a 3-page book review, and I'm hoping that my mind is not entrenched within the pages, electronic pages. I hope that I can demonstrate, or I hope that I can exalt exactly how I feel, but I'm sure there will be a couple tongue ties, as I've previously tried to record this once already. Mind you, over time, I'm fairly certain that my book reviews will strengthen, and if you would like to recommend any books other than The Monk, I look forward to that. So let us begin. So Matthew G. Lewis, The Monk. So circa 1775, one of the top 100 Oxford reads. I found that amongst 3 acts, the first was compelling. It was very strict in writing, and it was profuse, contrite, and expatiated with riddles. I was waiting for the build-ups. The prose was interesting at first, but still a little dull. Somewhat kilter to summarize the aspects would thrive. I was really waiting for it. A glance onto the rear side covers the prejudice with quick assortments. So the task milestones, you're waiting for it to happen, still expecting it to be a bit of a ridicule if I was looking into it so much. It really kiltered around the theme for Madonna the Saint being a goddess type figure. Several saints throughout the book. There was Saint Lucia, Saint Genevieve, and Saint Clare. So Ambrosio, the monastery monk, orphaned and fully exalted, the first procession in the book on Thursday within Spain's procession. The predecessor of the church now lavishly embellishes the teaching beyond rapport of any monastic rivalry and scorns any pervile views into penitence. So very profound, emotionally sulky, and devoted to dismal living. A coin-termed acronym for the bookworm is despondency. I've always enjoyed that word because they say it's known to be a sin. So you have despondency, PTSD, or PTDI. So pride, timidity, discretion, and idiocracy. I like that. So if you ever find yourself silent at work, PTDI. All the while, Ambrosio burns for scholarly attunements and retains yearnings for appeasing the attire of that which provides basic psychological steams from once being orphaned. It is easy to note that he is fine like dark chocolate. Loved his indulgences. His whole demeanor is rhythmic, so Casanova-like, enticing, alluring, enchanting, and devouring. As for the entrails of the retinue for the Spanish Inquisition to forebode itself, the man of holiness becomes overcapitulated when his livelihood embraces euphemized love and betrayals. Bear with me, gets a little tongue-tied. The mindset is placed within Madrid. Mind you, the Salem witch trials was in 1692 to 1775, a curtailed decade, formerly respite of the burning witches, 1,500 miles from Spain. Capuchin monasteries subterfuge the populace to inhabitants of both the poor and those of nobility. There within the St. Clare's monastic Capuchin temple monastery. So the opprobrium, the mood is tenacious and denotes promiscuity. The rigor of adultery is forsaken, and the regime is Gentile, seeking beloved attentions and acceptance, as per the usual. No handy stuff though. Smite thy enemy or those without reform to the house of oppression. So anyone that disobeys, they're about to get a good crack whipping. Roll call, one thing's to 1775. No healthcare provisions and no appropriated tried and true medicine. No television, that was for sure, yet the apothecaries elated to monasteries, riddles in romantic portions later on in the book. Trifles of power amongst the ranks of cardinals, dukes, prioress, and senior monks. So familiar tides in and out of church. With orchestral indignations, prove worthwhile and rather centrifugal for socialite opprobration. If you check out the females on the left, to proclamate oppressions of the time. So you notice that ties that bond one another, as at times relay the need for austerity. Sometimes Cupid is involved. You'll grow to love The Monk for its succor of wordplay and chastised amusements. So, from digressing, for the 4 fledgling teens, their early 20s satiate the edging demeanors which enthrall about late night walks with moonlit extravagances upon gables of crossroads and adjourned bridgeways overseeing rivers, which furthermore ruse attentions of notary republic. So teens on the lookout. So love tale is omissive yet undulating, ever wild yet sublimated among the watchful eyes of the extreme orthodox disciplines. So the nuns and the monks do not foreplay with cordials, yet offer a hint of grandiosity and cracking whips when power comes to play. For instance, I felt a demeanor of sorrow for the evil prioress when investigation led to proclivity towards her steed to power. Was she by chance on the offhand being like Nietzsche, where she was forced into her power play? So it left a lot to interpretation, a bit of allegory of infinite worth. Modernism would suffice that free will is beyond mode of the church. The monastery of St. Clair rendition safeguard for women of poverty and nobility, as such was the monastic establishment revered as the home of the patroness. So more often than not, there was a bit of power struggle there. Morality was dignified by belonging. Love restored the image to even the darkest underground cellars, and still always a light in the darkest of times. Even at the very end of the book, you can sense there's a light there. Heart playing for the damsel of her own discord. In seed of that light, Sister Virginia, known to be a nepotism within the book because her aunt, the prioress, and Donna Otto de Vie, oversaw nepotism, ties to power restitution to her reputation. That's later on in the book. So there is invocations of the Saint Genevieve via Virginia. Saint Genevieve is known to be combative to the flu and Attila the Hun in France. So Sister Virginia did that very well, as she is renowned to be a great beauty. She caught eyes of the spectators, and to find out which specific one, you'll have to read the book. So if you enjoy the little photo of Ambrosio to the side there, quite love that photo. Presentable adornments for proliferating the cadence and expulsion from the pages of the book are permeable, depth-adding, and really postulate the tale of metaphorism for the angst of teen love and marital bondage. Meaning, I don't want to give it away, but there's props within the book, so you'll have to use those instruments. Like Don Raymond, who means to love Sister Agnes, beckons stipulation from a revining from the Lichtenberg castle, yet happily redeems flight of fancy for a primitive ghost of the territory. So beguiling did he not know, and led to his uncompromised hospice, which hitherto troped the wandering Jew into action. So, the boy who cried wolf, somewhat allegory there, somewhat postulated, propagated. If you're into the execrations of demons and ghosts, this book will pull you in. The private agenda of love is known for screenplay relative in the first church procession. So from the very get-go, there's love, love of familiar ties, love of non-platonic ties. So there's a lot of love. So there's a romanticized love in the first little section there, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy the book. It's something great to be proud of when you read it. So Bias says, amongst the church people, I noticed a lot of wanted word to deceit. I rated some juicy sordid events, and Father Pablo's granted the cellar key, the underground refrain of catacombs. And yes, ill-ceased monastics, as per request of Ambrosio's esteemed colleague, whom boast to prevail passages of seat from the church's discretion. So, undulating wands, the premise of besought after wealth and a vault of tears. You have the relevance of love for one another to outstem courage into bravery. You're looking at the work, the best worker review. The best quote is, and it's flush middle of the book, still, however, their illicit commerce continued, but it was clear that he was led to her arms, not by love, but the cravings of brutal appetite. End quote. That is page 237 of 420. And I'll more than likely read that again for you. So let me found it. So if you're great at annotating, I recommend putting a little sigil at the bottom of the right-hand page or the page. So it's very nuanced and declarative way. The significance, the title alone seeks redemption, contemplation, and the tone of countryside in Ibsalian Peninsula of Spain. So it's no more than riversides among mountains with unending curvatures. So very mountainous with a lot of trees and rivers. I think the portrayal of the book realizes the foundation of humanity and equipped to warrant psychological embrace and empowers the present-day person around us and the world to see love as vital, essential, and demanded, to absorb, to realize what man will do in order to be loved. The nuns ever wild in their youth and their detards both present precaution for overvaluing their main focus of virtue. Virtue can therefore be seen as a sin when it lacks empathy. When you have absolute light and it doesn't refer to any darkness, that can be seen as nuanced or ignorant. And as throughout history, we've noticed that ignorance can do a lot. Such was the Spanish Inquisition's illumination, because they were brought into play. Let's get on to my favorite character, being Ambrosio. With all his succor, his might to engulf love all around himself, as heinous were his acts against the subterfuge of his heart. From day one, when Antonia ushered his attentions at the homestead of his confessional booth, temptations aroused his acts of violence, yet slowly did the plot pivot against Antonia. Its circumstances and severity reputations weren't such enforced by parazimes. One may notice that supernatural entities often bemused by prudence and prejudices, hidden as allegorical instillings. So there was a lot going on. There was a bit of juicy drama when trying to win over her heart. Altogether, the lot would suffice enough to say bespoken fancies. So, meanwhile, a lot wouldn't have evoked sympathies, wasn't moreover than forced relations on site amidst lacking interested parties. So, Don Lorenzo's provisional hospice thwarted Antonia's recovery or recoup. The Marquis de las Cisternas, which is Don Lorenzo, proclaiming to be debilitated by the phantom bleeding nun in Lichtenberg Castle, related to the unfortunate events. So, the author of the book procured some basic algorithms. So his writing style was rather algorithmic, predictable, referenced in Brendan Fraser's TV shows. If you happen to find that episode of Girlfriends, it's algorithmic, it's predictable writing prose. So cadence of books antecedent, its precedents being rhetorical, viewed as allegorical or algorithmic. It was very predictable about how the next portion of the book was be written. But Oxford Finest was a worthwhile read. Morally put, I was left bewildered, confounded, and I adored the last few pages, as the devil entices anyone with a remote pride being exsanguinated amidst the pulpits and crevices from murky monastery views outside the cliffs of Madrid, Spain. So, was he left banished in a way? Somewhat. So we have monasteries, both men and women, seeking Thursday processions to swarthy esteems and scandalized epithets, yearning to exalt the maelstrom of bricks and moss-laden confinements. So then you have young scavengers, while storytelling their wealth and estate relations, to their undergoing serenades, to bestowing final bearings for ghostly apparitions. So quite a lot. So they are banishing ghosts, billowing war cries against all that was known from a plethora of nuns, castrating monuments of their beyond inculpable prowess, all given to superstition. So the nuns banished superstitions. A lot of lore from Monk Rosario, formerly laterally Matilda, the head commandeer to overthrow even the devil's contortions. The lore that subdues the contender throughout the book is worthwhile, juicy enough, and prevailing to instill a sense of pride and a sensory intake belonging to ignominy, as restorative to an orphan stands to be innately entwined to that statuesque self of Saint Madonna. So, in a way, Ambrosio found himself all the while returning to Saint Madonna. I believe the book is reincarnated to esteem the Spanish Inquisition as abolishing the need of church and state. So it abolishes church and state, yet furthermore subtly promoting the acts of goddess worship. And with that being said, the final quote outside the book that I found most directly would relate to this and make you feel good after reading it is, quote, "And in the end I will seek you out amongst the stars. The space dust of me will whisper I love you into the infinity of the universe." End quote. So, thank you. And let's see, page 237, which is flush middle of the book. I wanted to note the best passage, and there's also another one, like flush middle of the book. I was like, I'm feeling both of these quotes, 236 and 237, but 237, about two-thirds of the way down, it states, "Still, however, their illicit commerce continued, but it was clear that he was led to her arms, not by love, but the craving of brutal appetite." So to me, if you've read the book, it sums it all up. One more time, I'm going to read it. Still, however, their illicit commerce continued. It was clear that he was led to her arms, not by love, but the craving of brutal appetite. So that will go on my personal Rick site. That is the most renowned quote of the book, and I really loved it. So I hope that you enjoyed the book, and if you want to rate the book with me underneath, what would I give it? 1 out of 5 stars. I'm going to say for historical value, I would think it's not so much oriented with historical dates, but it is. I'm going to give this book a solid 3. It's something to be proud of reading, I would think, because it's Oxford top 100 prints. It's from Grove Press, publisher book housing, Grove Press. Of value, do I think it'd be virtuous for each person to read? It has a definitive Gothic feel to it, and that was the entire premise of the book, was to feel Gothic. Early 1800s, Industrial Revolution, where they're having more equipment to make assembly lines more possible. Did I like it? Sometimes I fell asleep while reading it, but I read it, and did I enjoy it? It was entertaining. I recommend reading this book during the wintertime. Certainly during the wintertime. But yeah, ultimately that sums it up. So if you read it, like, comment, subscribe. And my next book I want to mention, it's more young adult, I would think, but The Cloisters by Kathy Hayes will be my next read. And then from there I will navigate back to a Gothic folk tale. It's Scottish, and it's called The Private Memoirs and Confessions of a Justified Sinner by James Hogg. And there's quite a bit of jargon that's Scottish, to where it's words like down under, or there's quite a few idioms that we're unfamiliar with, that has an appendix to relay the foundation of. So that to me will be interesting, but it's about a doppelganger, and he meets a doppelganger who's supposedly the devil, and he goes on a killing spree. But for the time, what was it, early 1600s or some aching of the same time period for this, I think it would be a great return to a lot of Gothic tales. So again, I just want to highlight thriftbooks.com. I don't have a private link or anything that I could give to you for referencing you there, but that's a lot of great book content at cheap values. But anyhow, I loved finishing it. I know that I annotated the last page because cliff breakers get to me quite a bit. If you've read Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, the first book, The Discovery of Witches, ends in a cliffhanger where they jump through a portal, and you're like, is it Adam and Eve? What's the vibe there? But so Mercy by the river overflows, and so the river overflows, and it really revels in the idea of mercy, and I think it was really touching, heartfelt, and I love that. So I think that if you get to that point, you feel a sense of sympathy for Ambrosio, and Ambrosio to me looks like that guy. You'll see it. It's kind of, I seen it very earthly and brown. Like I love the effect of him. Like just the name brought together the whole vibe. But yeah, I think it's culturally relevant to realize the power of church and state. So people will retaliate. Anyhow, thank you for your time. So 20-minute review, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you.